Hi everyone, in the last video we talked about the Houses of Parliament, the most important building in UK politics. We spoke a bit about the building itself, how it's located in Westminster in London, and how it was originally used by the monarchy and then later by politicians. We also talked about the first of the two houses in the Houses of Parliament, the House of Commons. If you remember, this is where the MPs work, the Members of Parliament. The Prime Minister and all the other ministers are all MPs, and they all work in the House of Commons. There is another house, however, and this one is called the House of Lords. The seats in here are red, while they're green in the House of Commons. There are about 830 Lords, but they're not chosen in the same way as the MPs in the House of Commons. In the House of Commons, MPs are elected by the people during an election. The Lords, however, are not elected by the people. In the past, for much of British history, a seat in the House of Lords was inherited. This means it passed from father to son. If your father was a Lord, when he died you would take his seat and become the Lord afterwards. This happened with families that were very rich and powerful, people who owned a lot of land. These people were known as the upper class or lords, which is where the name House of Lords comes from. However, this tradition of inheriting a seat, the seat passing from father to son, is happening less and less. Today, Lords are mostly chosen by the Prime Minister, and this choice is agreed by the Queen. The people chosen to be Lords today are important people who have been successful in other areas. They might be old prime ministers or other politicians, famous lawyers and business people, or perhaps someone who used to be head of the army or a famous academic. They're people with lots of experience and wisdom, with long and successful careers behind them. They're experts in different areas such as law, science or business. The Lords also include some religious people, such as the leader of the Church of England, but it's mostly these successful people chosen by the Prime Minister. Although the Lords can create new laws, it's mostly the House of Commons that does this. The Lords look at what the Commons have suggested, talk about it, and then vote yes or no. A few videos ago we talked about the Queen. As we know, the Queen doesn't have any real power. It's the Prime Minister and the government that run the country. However, the Queen still has a few traditional jobs. For example, every year it's the Queen that opens and closes Parliament. The Queen also closes Parliament before an election every 5 years. She also gives a speech to Parliament every year. In this speech, she talks about what the Prime Minister and the government are going to do over the next year. The Queen doesn't actually write this speech herself. It's written by the government. She just reads it out. It's just a tradition for the King or Queen to give this speech and explain what the government's plans are for the next year. The Queen also has to agree to and say yes to every new law. When a law has been agreed by both the House of Commons and the House of Lords, it is then given to the Queen. Once the Queen agrees, it becomes a part of UK law. This is just traditional, however. The Queen never actually says no. If a law has been agreed by both the Commons and the Lords, the Queen will always agree too. The last time a king or queen said no to a law was more than 300 years ago. So that's how the Houses of Parliament work in the UK. The most important place is the House of Commons, and the people who work there are chosen during an election. This includes the Prime Minister and the other government ministers. The other place is the House of Lords, where successful people from business or science or law are chosen, mostly by the Prime Minister, to become Lords. The Houses of Parliament also have a lot of traditional ways of doing things. We saw this, for example, with the Queen having to agree to any new laws, and the Queen giving a speech every year. explaining what the government plans to do. Hopefully these videos have given you a better understanding of how politics works in the UK.